I get to introduce is Jennifer Montgomery. We know Jennifer Montgomery well. She was actually a judge for us the first year that we did this. Jennifer comes from Wine America about 10 years ago. Excuse me, probably not 10 years ago. You spent 10 years at Wine America. After there, you were in Illinois and also Nebraska, helping them with their wine and grape associations. Now we're lucky enough to have her here in the state. So she's bringing all of that experience here to help us. I think she's got unique experience to take us through her presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer. Thanks for being here, Jennifer.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys this morning. Thanks so much for including me. So I am going to share my screen here. And basically, what I wanted to talk to you guys about for a few minutes is an overall view of the American wine industry and some of its diversity and where Arizona fits in and where we see the vision for the national industry and the state industry going forward. So the title of my presentation is Different Beginnings, Same Destination. So as Michael referenced, I used to work for the National Association of American Wineries. And when I was there, I was fortunate enough to be able to travel around the country, getting to know the different state wine industries, getting to know different people, different wine styles, learning about different grapes that were grown. And one of the things that really stuck out to me as I was getting into the wine industry was the fact that there were so many different people from so many different professional backgrounds. It seemed like when I went and talked to people, nobody had the same job. Everybody had a different job, and now they were coming into the wine industry. This list that I have on the screen here, it's not all inclusive, but it is some of the people that I met on the way, just to illustrate that people are so passionate about this industry that they're drawn to it from all different walks of life, including engineers, politicians, farmers, athletes, rock stars, educators, and corporate executives. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find another industry that has that kind of diversity and draws people from all different backgrounds into one collaborative place. Another thing I noticed when I was meeting with people from around the country, they all had different reasons for coming to the wine industry. Some of them were looking for a hobby, and we all know how that can sometimes be a misnomer when it comes to getting involved in the wine industry. People wanted second jobs, people wanted something to do in retirement, people who just wanted to get into farming in some cases. So there really was a lot of diversity that I came across as I was talking to people all over the country. So that's who we are as an industry. And we have as much diversity in the types of grapes that we grow on the national scale as we do professional background diversity. If you look in the Northeast, you see a lot of initially they were doing primarily fruit wines. There were a lot of orchards. They were making wines out of that. But now they're making more French-American hybrids like Cival and Chardonnay. These are varietals maybe you haven't come across yet, but they basically were embracing varietals that do well in that climate. In the Mid-Atlantic, for example, my home state of Virginia, they do French vinifera, the very popular Cabernet Franc and Viognier do really well in the Mid-Atlantic states. And then once you go down south, the wine varietal changes drastically. There is a lot of muscadine grown in the south. That's a grape that does really well in the humidity and the climate down there. So you'll see a lot of that. It's a sweet wine. And actually, in North Carolina, there is a 400-year-old muscadine vine that's called the mother vine that was planted, they think, around 1584. It is still there, and there are folks in the wine industry that have to get special permission to take grafts off of that 400-year-old vine and make muscadine wine down in the South. So, that's still something you see a lot of. In the Midwest, they are growing predominantly French American hybrids, like they are in the Northeast. Again, things like Cheval Blanc and Chardonnay. And actually in the Midwest, the Norton grape does very well too. That grape actually originated in Virginia and was grown by a man named Dr. Norton, but Virginia didn't have a whole lot of interest in that grape. So Missouri actually brought Norton from Virginia into Missouri, and they have now made that a state grape, and it's something they do a lot of marketing around. So again, Norton and the French American hybrids are the predominant grape there. And then once you get up into the upper Midwest, you're going to come across the cold climate varietals. There was a gentleman called Mr. Swenson, who was a grape geneticist. He developed a lot of cold climate grape varietals, short growing season varietals, and actually the University of Minnesota has picked up his work. So the wine industry up in the upper Midwest in those cold winters, like in Minnesota and Nebraska, is very vibrant because they're growing things that do well in that climate. Things like Edelweiss, Frontenac, St. Pepin, St. Croix. Again, maybe these are grapes you haven't heard of before, but they do very well in the upper Midwest. Once you get into the Northwest, like Washington and Oregon, you're going to see a lot of Pinot Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon, and does very well in the Northwest. And then here in the Southwest, clearly we're doing European varietals as well. So you can see, again, so much diversity in this industry, and there's room for all of it. Consumers love the diversity of American wines. Back in the 1980s, 1990s, everybody wanted that California wine experience, and states were trying to grow California grapes, and it just doesn't work out well with the different climates in the U.S. So by the early 2000s, when the grape industry really started to explode in the U.S., states started embracing different grapes that did well in their climates. And that's when we saw more wineries, that's when we saw more acreage, because the states were matching grapes better with their climates. And, for example, in Nebraska, they don't want you to come to Nebraska looking for a California wine experience. They want you to come to Nebraska looking for a Nebraska wine experience. And, it's the same thing here in Arizona. We want people to come to Arizona looking forward to an Arizona wine experience. So again, it's a lot of diversity in the grapes that we're growing, in the wines that we're making. The quality is better. And it's still one united industry across the country. So clearly, American wine is doing well, and it's here to stay. And just to give you kind of the 30,000-foot overview of the national wine industry, in case you haven't seen these numbers, as of 2020, there were just over 10,000 wineries in the United States. And again, that significant increase, a lot of that happened in the early and mid 2000s. So the numbers have kind of leveled off since then, but there was really an explosion of wineries getting started across the country. And again, 10,000 is nothing insignificant for sure. The Table Wine brand in 2020 generated about $673 million in sales in the United States. And the average wine consumption per United States resident in 2020 was 2.95. Oh, excuse me, in 2018 was 2.95 gallons, which was up from 2.34 gallons in 2005. So again, people are getting more interested in wine. Wine's becoming more approachable. People are more interested in having a local wine experience. They want to be connected with the wineries in their home states. If they go on vacation, they want to learn more about wines in other states as well. So that's a fortunate trend that we're seeing. People are more excited about wine and being more open-minded about it. As a matter of fact, the U.S. has nearly 1 million acres of grape-bearing land. So after all of those numbers of the national industry, here are some local stats on where Arizona fits in. Arizona has just a little over 100 farm winery licenses in the state, and the first license in Arizona was issued in Sonora in 1983. Majority of Arizona wineries, as you probably know, are small family businesses, owner-operators, operating in rural Arizona. So by that fact alone, you can tell that it's a very important industry in terms of rural economic development. And wine industry related tourism in Arizona generates just over $56 million in total economic output. Some more local stats about our home state industry that you might be interested in. There are approximately $3.6 million in local and state taxes that are generated from the wine industry. So the localities and local governments certainly pay attention to that. The tourism jobs created by the industry here in the state is an estimated 640 full-time jobs, and about 600,000 people visit the vineyards and tasting rooms annually in Arizona. So that is definitely a big deal. There are approximately 1,500 acres of grapes planted here in the state. So the Arizona Wine Growers Association is currently working to commission a new economic impact study so we can tell a more robust story about our industry, pull in more numbers so that lawmakers, decision makers will understand what we really contribute to the state's economy. So going back to, as I said, the national industry being a collaborative industry, the Arizona has put a lot of effort this year into forging some new partnerships at the national level so that our state industry can have a seat at the table when it comes to determining important positions and issues for our industry. As a matter of fact, the AWGA is a board member of the National Grape Research Alliance. So we are at the table when it comes to discussions of research priorities for the national grape and wine industry. So we are in the room with people in California like the Gallows, like Jerry Lohr. We are in the room with other states, including Washington and Missouri and Virginia, in talking about important research that is needed for our industry. And so that Arizona is now has a seat in helping determine that. Another place we're forging partnerships is with the Grape Growers of America. The AWGA has joined that organization, and through that, we're helping advocate and lobby for national industry public policy issues that are important to us. So it means reaching out to Washington, D.C. and telling them what we care about and what's important. And then the other national partnership that we have recently entered into has to do with the Specialty Crop Farm Bill Alliance. And so in 2008, Congress actually included programs in the Farm Bill that were specifically geared towards specialty crops, which is us. Things like the Value Added Producer Grant, things like the Specialty Crop Research Initiative, the Specialty Crop Block Grant, So we are working with a group of specialty crop interests now to make sure that every time that farm bill comes up every 5 years, that we're still there advocating for these programs that are important for the industry. And again, you know, Arizona is in these conversations, and we are help driving public policy at the national level. And so after all of the diversity I mentioned, the fact that this industry is able to come together and agree on research priorities, agree on advocacy strategies, agree on specialty crop programs for the Farm Bill at the federal level, I think that speaks volumes about who this industry really is, who the people are, how dedicated everyone is, that we can all work together. And the fact that the Arizona industry is involved is really a big deal. And so, as I've talked about diversity, the things that bring people to this industry that we all have in common include things like passion and a desire for community and the lifestyle of the wine industry, love of the land, the fact that it provides an opportunity for creativity and so much collaboration. Those are things that you don't get in every industry. So I think we're unique in that. And I think that it's definitely a passion and a lifestyle for all of us. And even though we've come from different places, we've all landed in the same place, and we are all moving forward together. So with that, I will thank you again for letting me speak to you today. And I guess, Paula, you will let me know if there are any questions.
Yes, we have a couple of questions for you, Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
All righty. Well, Lisa wants to know what do you consider specific to the growth of the Arizona wine industry?
I think that the fact that Arizona has put some really significant thought into the education, the quality of the educational programs in getting people up to speed with quality assurance, getting people just really a good solid baseline of the right way to do things to make Arizona wine great, make it better. And I think that attracts more people. I think that's going to get the attention of more consumers. So I really do think education is a big part of that.
I absolutely agree with you there. Lisa would also like to know if there is an AWGA partnership with the Verde Valley Wine Consortium.
Partnership as in official, or I would love to find a way for us to collaborate, especially now that we're focused on some of our basic programs. Since we don't have as many events on our plate this year because of COVID, it'd be a really good time to brainstorm and figure out ways to collaborate with each other, because I think having everybody in the room is the way to move forward, making sure everybody's heard.
I agree. What do you consider the best grape variety for Arizona?
You know, that is really tough because Arizona is doing well with so many varietals. For me, it comes down to, you know, clearly it would come down to personal preference, but I think that Arizona is showing that we really have the ability to do really wonderful things with a variety of grapes here.
Yeah, it's too soon to tell. I think that's true. Louis wants to know, does anyone in the Arizona wine industry work with players in the Arizona craft beer industry to influence common goals?
The answer is yes. Actually, the AWGA has a board member who is the executive director of the Arizona Brewers Guild. So he provides valuable input. We do discuss advocacy efforts. We do discuss legislation together. And I do see that we are going to work, the alcohol industry as a whole is going to work more closely together in the coming year when it comes to legislation and trying to make sure that we have a better business climate for all of us.
Yeah. So Mitch wants to know, do you see the wine industry growing in the next few years? We've been about 120 wineries actually for a few years now. How do you see it growing?
Well, I think one of the keys to growth is, as I mentioned earlier, Arizona wine will have the reputation of quality and great wine. I think that's going to attract more people. I think once we have better laws on the books so that it's not such a hard business to get into, I think that's going to play a big role in it. And hopefully we can see some of that come to fruition within the next couple of years. So I think, yes, there is room for growth, but I do think it's going to take sea change and when it comes to alcohol laws in the state.
Yeah, I think so. John wants to know, is the AWJ looking into how to adjust grape growing due to climate change in Arizona?
That is definitely something that is on our list in those conversations within the National Grape Research Alliance, because that's an issue for everybody. So it is one of the topics we're discussing.
Okay. Bill wants to know, this is funny, do you feel that events like the Emerging Winemakers Competition and Symposium help grow the wine industry?
Yes, I do. In part because, as you did this year with the symposium, you reached out to other states and I think the more we do that, the more we do the outreach to the other states, the more we establish some partnerships.
States and places and get them involved?
Well, I would be happy to work with you guys on that, because I do know the executive directors in basically all of the surrounding states. And part of it is, you know, previously there just hasn't been that much communication between the states. I think a lot of states are not aware of what Arizona is doing, and we can definitely change that by more outreach to those executive directors, because they definitely are excited about Arizona and they definitely want to be a good partner for us.
I think that people are really interested. What do you see as some of the legislative hurdles facing the Arizona wine industry?
Well, one of the things we've talked about at the AWGA is the fact that and it's not just our tendency, but people only tend to show up at the legislature when they need something or when something's already happened. The Arizona wine industry needs to be more proactive, show up and educate the lawmakers, even when there's not a bill that we're tracking, just by being there and as a consistent part of the constituency. That's going to open the eyes of lawmakers. I think a lot of the laws are being made that are not helpful to us, but not because the lawmakers want to hurt us, but because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
Because we haven't messaged strongly enough to them yet. And that's something we're talking about for this year.
Oh, well, here's another one from Lisa. Is the AWJ interested in creating a roadmap for growers and winemakers to integrate sustainable practices into their business models?
I think that's going to be a necessary piece that we do develop.
I agree. Trevor is asking, with COVID-19, do you think direct-to-consumer shipping is increasing in Arizona, or is that not the case? How is it affecting the industry?
I can say with all certainty what I've seen, not just Arizona, but on a national scale, the lawmakers did change the laws to make shipping easier, or to make, curbside, or, however, they loosened those laws so that the wineries and the breweries could stay in business. I don't see them backtracking on that. I think a lot of this stuff, it's like once you get that foot in the door, it's easier to move forward. I don't think they're going to repeal a lot of that stuff that they enacted to help.
Yeah, let's hope not. Does the AWGA inform the wine community of new technologies helpful to their business?
We are still working on our communication strategies. But yeah, once we get all of that set up, and we will be putting out information, we're gonna reach out to the industry and find out what kind of information is most useful. So we definitely want to be responsive. We don't want to be necessarily reactive. We want to be proactive in getting people what they need.
Right. Shane has a question. This is a good one. How do you think the recent increase in mead production will affect the wine industry?
Mead production.
Mead.
MEAD,
MEAD.
Yes, okay. I'm sorry, can you define that for me? Mead production?
Mead, the alcoholic beverage made out of honey. Mead.
Oh, mead.
Mead production.
Okay, I was like, mead
we had a lot
production.
of mead entries into the competition this year, and they're amazing. And we're seeing a definite increase in the production of mead and the interest of the consumers in mead. How is that going to affect the wine industry?
I think that's going to be good for the wine industry. If you look in states like Montana and Colorado, they have a very vibrant mead industry, and it's integrated into the wine. And it's not like a set aside. You can't do both. It's like integrated into it. And in that clearly appeals to people that might not be interested in Cabernet Sauvignon. So it kind of broadens the tent, and that's a good thing.
I agree. Any thoughts on the impact of cannabis you may have on the wine market?
I actually have not considered that, but I will give that some thought. I don't know an answer to that.
Okay, read the Silicon Valley Bank. They did a whole expose on it, and it kind of turns out it's not really going to be too big of an impact at this point. With your experience outside of the AZ industry, how is Arizona wines? How are they being viewed from outside?
I think, like I said earlier, I think Arizona has a little bit of a problem with people being aware of the industry outside of Arizona. When I've reached out and touched base with the executive directors in other states that I've known for a long time, and I said, yes, I'm working with Arizona, they really hadn't heard much about Arizona until we start having the conversations. So I think there's a big learning curve outside of Arizona for Arizona wines, but I do think that when people do experience them, people have been blown away by it.
That's been my experience too. Dennis has an interesting question for you. The spotted lanternfly from China has invaded the East Coast vineyards and does damage to vines. Wine experts expect this insect to work its way west. Is this collaboration include work on invasive species control?
Absolutely. The NGRA is very laser focused on invasive species control. So we are part of that conversation.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any more questions for Jennifer? It was very informative talk. We appreciate you being here. Who got one more? John Brick said, with AZ entering the third decade of drought, what can vineyards do to continue? Does the AWG have any resources? Got any water resources hanging out down there?
That is something that we are going to have a robust conversation with the Arizona Department of Agriculture. I don't know that we've had a whole lot of conversations with them in the past about this, but that's something I want to change.
Okay.
So I expect it's going to also be a big part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's going to have to be. All right, everybody, if anybody else doesn't have any questions for Jennifer at this time,